I was struck by how far this predator would go to instill fear in his victims, Paul Holes said. It was psychological terror. A detective told Holes about a 2002 case in which a young kidnapping victim was identified using her DNA and a genealogy website. Holes wondered, could he do the same with the Golden State Killer? In Guerrini et al.'s research titled Should Police Have Access to Genetic Genealogy Databases, Capturing the Golden State Killer and Other Criminals Using a Controversial New Forensic Technique, they explore how law enforcement used a genetic genealogy to solve forensic cold cases. So my name is Mike, and I'm going to be covering a new trend in forensic nursing called the ethics of genetic genealogy. Law enforcement already works plenty with DNA. Typically, investigators take DNA from a crime scene and compare it to a suspect's DNA, or they enter the crime scene DNA into a national database to see if there's a match with a known criminal offender. If there is no match, then the perpetrator's identity is unknown. Now, though, investigators can take crime scene DNA and work with genetic companies to turn that evidence into raw data file and upload it to GEDmatch.com. GEDmatch is an open-source DNA databank that can be scoured to link DNA from one person to another. It was used to solve the Golden State Killer case in about 4 months, while there was data being collected initially for about 40 years trying to catch him. One company, Parabon Nanolabs, has partnered with law enforcement to conduct familial genetic searches for criminals and has uploaded more than 140 profiles to GEDmatch since May of 2018. The site then spits out closely related people to the perpetrator, allowing investigators to create a family tree and begin zeroing in on those who may have had close contact with the victim. They can then figure out who was around them at that time. So where exactly do they get this DNA? They get it from DTC, direct-to-consumer sites like 23andMe or AncenstryDNA.com. On its website, 23andMe openly states that it chooses to use all practical and legal administrative resources to resist requests from law enforcement. Similarly, Ancestry says it only releases customer information in response to a trial, grand jury, or subpoena. The GEDmatch.com founder, Curtis Rogers, states that the ethics of allowing police any access to a site made up of people's private DNA remains uncomfortable. He has worked to educate GEDmatch users that when they input their DNA, they're opting in to its potential use in police investigations, which is now prominently displayed in the site's terms of service. He, like C.C. Moore, another genetic genealogist who started out using the technology to help foster kids find their parents, states that if it helps solve old murders, they're cautiously okay with it. GEDmatch, which contains about 1 million genetic profiles that people have uploaded after having their DNA analyzed by other companies, such as 23andMe, updated its privacy policy following the Golden State Killer case to explicitly state that law enforcement may access a person's profile to solve murder and sexual assault cases, which to me sounds perfectly fine. Although many genetic service providers warn users about the potential for third parties, including law enforcement, to access personal genetic data, these warnings were usually buried in the privacy policies and terms of service that many users may have never even read. Yet among those who do appreciate these potential forensic uses, not all may be particularly disturbed by them. Personally, I think this is a great deterrent, just knowing that if you leave DNA at the crime scene, you will inevitably get caught. Forensic nurses are at the forefront of this controversy. They collect the physical samples. Before they were trying to find a match with a convicted felon on a list. Now they have a much wider net to cast. Now the DNA can be used to create a web of people close to the perpetrator. If we are collecting samples from patients, it is important that we help explain to them what they are used for and the intended and unintended consequences, and advocate for laws and policies that serve the victim's best interest. So the other side of this argument is that it can lead investigators to sometimes target the wrong person. This actually occurred in the hunt for the Golden State Killer when investigators honed in on an elderly man living in an Oregon nursing home whose daughter had uploaded her genetic DNA to a genealogy service. The other main argument is that some people say this is just another example of technology spying on us. I, for one, dislike my Alexa showing me ads for things I was discussing in confidence as much as the next person, but this is very different. In this case, it's actually being used for good, to stop perpetrators and remind them that even if they are a first-time offender and we don't have their exact DNA, at least saved, that they can still get caught, especially through if another distant relative has uploaded theirs. It gets even trickier when just because the person who submitted their DNA is okay with law enforcement using it, those with genetic identities and being shared online without their knowledge under fake names can be unaware and have not consented. And then lastly, some say it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment, which states that our property cannot be searched without probable cause. So like I said before, that I believe if this tree can be built to catch a murder or rape suspect, it's probable cause. So one of the final arguments is that the person being arrested and convicted these people are typically low income and black, and the prototypical customer of DTC, direct-to-consumer genetic testing services, is high income and white. And such disparity, but however, these disparities did not translate into differences in the respondent support based on income or race, according to the above study that I mentioned before. So I believe that policy discussions about whether to place limits on access should at least take into account the various purposes for which access to this info can be obtained. While perceived invasions of privacy appear to be tolerable when the purpose is to catch violent or particularly depraved offenders, it seems that many would draw a line at searching their data to solve more ordinary basic crimes. However, this seems to be at odds with the U.S. Supreme Court's recent decision in Carpenter v. U.S., which held that individuals have a legitimate expectation of privacy in historical cell phone information that bars police from accessing those data without a warrant. So the study that I mentioned before, it shows that 79% of the 1,587 individuals polled supported use in major crimes against the person that's been inflicted of homicide and rape. Respondents were 80% in favor of these activities applied to violent crime versus 39% in cases in property crime. So although it seems most people are in favor of using it, we still need these boundaries. So this begs the question, what rights or disclosures is needed for those individuals who have populated the DNA database, enabling individuals to seek them out as relatives, but for a very different purpose? Ideally, a full disclosure is provided to support informed consent, as the individual then decides with full knowledge of opinions, of options and consequences, where they can express their autonomy in choosing to enable or deny having their profile searched. The study by Ray Wickenheiser, titled Forensic Genealogy, Bioethics, and the Golden State Killer Case, covers the concepts of proportionality to decide this ethical debate. The principle of proportionality states that there should be common sense, reasonable balance between choices and their consequences, such that the balance between the good achieved is maximized with as little harm as possible occurring as a result. One example of this is in palliative care nursing. Palliative care situations in which a patient's life may inadvertently be shortened while pain is managed. On one hand, they're more comfortable, but on the other, their lifespan is shortened. So it's similar to that. Lastly, there's the issue of cost, both financial and emotional. The cost of violent crime to victims and their families is enormous. Besides the high cost to crime victims, the cost of investigations in these cases is extremely high, with investigators working years on largely unsolved cases. If investigators are allowed access, individuals placing their genetic data in private and public databases are giving up rights to privacy. The big question is, to what extent should the data be available for investigators for use to provide leads to solve major crimes? My argument is that for violent crimes, this data should be available. Also, Wickenheiser states that prudent application will ensure that the risks are managed to provide the maximum benefit, thereby meeting the ethical principle of proportionality while balancing autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, justice, objectivity, and right to privacy. So this way they can maximize the value of the evidence while minimizing the harm to others. So not only do I believe that this should be fair game, I also think that it should be encouraged to submit your DNA to a website like GED Match to help law enforcement, the same way that we would if we're seeking justice, if it were someone that we knew. The Golden State Killer murdered 12 people and raped over 50 women over several decades. Imagine if we had this technology to stop him back then. If you're interested in helping law enforcement, you can do your civil service and go to yourdnaguide.com to upload your DNA sample from a website like 23andMe or Ancestry.com. Thank you.